We are here closing out Networking Field Day exclusive with Aruba. We've had a great conversation so far. We've learned a lot of features about the new Aruba 8400 switch, hardware, software, analytics, all the exciting things that the new generation of switches, well, honestly, things I think they should be doing, and thanks to Aruba, things they are doing now. But what we wanted to do, we wanted to have an opportunity for the presenters, for the geniuses behind this product to really have a chance to answer some questions. Because one of the things we do at Tech Field Day, we like to ask a lot of questions. We like to try to get as much engagement as possible. And so this is really just, as much as I tell people we don't have Q&A at Tech Field Day, we have Q&A at Networking Field Day exclusive. So we've already seen some great questions being fired in from Twitter. So thanks to everyone who's been asking those. Please keep those coming. But I want to take just a quick moment for everyone on the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll launch right into it. So Michael, go ahead.
Hi again, everybody. Michael Dickman. I'm Vice President, Product Line Management for Switching.
Rafi Zadicario, Vice President of Software Development in Switching.
Tom Black, Vice President, General Manager, Campus Switching.
And Charles Clark, a fellow here at Aruba Networking.
Awesome. Thanks, gentlemen. We really appreciate you guys willing to stand up here and kind of be the targets for some of the inquisitiveness that's out there on the internet. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off with one of the questions that I've seen scroll by already. We talked a little bit today about the 8400 and how it's a core switch. It has a bunch of core switching functionality. Who are the target customers for this? Because it kind of feels like it could fit into a provider enterprise, but also does it have a place in the campus?
Yeah, sure, I'll take that one. So the target customers, it really is a great fit for basically any traditional campus. I think where we're first going to insert from a horizontal target customer's perspective is basically a big campus aggregation, right? So a traditional campus aggregation is a good fit. It fits very well from a feature perspective, form, functions, et cetera. I think maybe the more interesting answer would be the types of customers we've seen be most responsive. Mm-hmm. So higher education, for example, they tend not to have a huge IT department, maybe on average a little more forward thinking. And we've even had some customers in terms of higher ed say, look, we have students who are interested in networking. They're more comfortable with programming. We'd actually like to involve them in the way this works. And so higher ed's been interesting. We've even had things like K through 12, and then also industrial and traditional enterprise in a normal office building scenario like the one we're in right now.
Awesome.
Some of the strong interest, especially internationally, has been from customers that have fairly large sites where the building is a huge failure domain. You're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands of people, where the carrier class design really kind of resonates.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the delegates now, because I know you guys probably have some questions that you'd like to jump in here with. So who wants to go first?
I want to know a little bit about the analytics engine. And I know we saw how it can help you identify problems that have happened in the network. Like, for example, we saw the DHCP issue and how it was able to monitor stuff like that. And I imagine that it can do this, but can it integrate with the identity management solutions so that if there are network access issues based on policy, that can be identified rather than troubleshooting a network issue? Being able to just say, well, no, that's policy. You're not supposed to be able to get there.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that we kind of glossed over in the demo that we did earlier was some of the information that those agents were collecting from the access switches was the role of that client as it attached to the network, and that role actually comes from ClearPass, from our authentication system, and so as clients attach to the network. There's information about their role and privileges on the network, and the agents themselves can get access to that information and use that in their analysis. And so that there is an ability to do those types of things. In addition, I talked about how these agents can communicate with other systems, so it could actually be communicating with the authentication service and doing queries or with Active Directory or whatever you've got in order to gather more information about that client and determine whether there is an issue with the network or if there's an issue with the client or whatnot. Yep. So there is that ability for the analytics engine agents to be able to interact with things outside of the box, and it gives you the ability to do that.
And it's just going to come down to how you've got that script written as
Yes.
what it looks at.
Yes,
Correct.
Exactly.
All right, so I've got a question that's coming from the internet. And it's a question I had earlier, so it's perfect timing as well. Do you expect Linux security issues like Heartbleed, shell shock, and other things to impact day-to-day operations? And how do you expect incremental patches for kernel-level bugs like that?
Right. So at the heart of the network of the OS is Linux, as you said, and we're using essentially plain vanilla Linux kernel and a lot of the open source Linux utilities on top of that. Major issues in those utilities could impact the OS. However, there is significant access control in being able to access the different APIs and
the underlying capabilities of it.
Right, a lot of these capabilities. The fact that we maintain pretty much plain vanilla kernel allows us to patch things very quickly. We expect to be able to issue patches within a number of days or weeks, depending on the complexity of the patch being available. And so that should actually be a very seamless and quick process as well.
Yeah, so just to add to that, currently in our global data center where we do most of our QA and validation, we actually have our servers and our systems are hooked into the National Vulnerabilities Database. Mm-hmm. So we check 365 days a year for known breaches, reported breaches, and then we look at those breaches and we examine our entire source code repository for instances or existence of code that may be subject to that breach. And so actually our servers basically every hour are letting us know if we're subject to a reported breach. Additionally, we have a very robust security hardening program as part of any major release that we do, kind of developed over the years, and Charles has been actually very instrumental in guiding that for us. Thanks for the question.
So I actually want to jump in here and talk a little bit about that because we're seeing a lot of other companies kind of go to that model of using a plain vanilla, in most cases either a Linux or a BSD kernel, and then they're building their software stack on top of that. Are you going to start, when you look at patching, say, like OpenSSL or something like that because of things like Heartbleed, are you going to issue patches on those incremental service programs like the daemons and things like that, so you can quickly patch as opposed to having to do integrated unit testing with, okay, we tweaked OpenSSL, now we have to test 14 other modules and issue this huge patch to get everything to a base code level? Or are you just going to say, we're patching this quickly and we recommend this baseline level at the underlying operating system?
Right, so one of the big benefits we have with such a modular system is the fact that changes to a single module have basically no impact on other modules. That's absolutely core to the system. The fact that all modules communicate to each other strictly through the database allows for that very significant modularity. We expect the software that we put out to always be a full software stack, that when you install, you're on a certain version. When you call us, you tell us this is the version number and we can support you on that. But to your question about how quickly can we do that and can we ensure testing is very fast and accurate, we can do that because of the modularity. So it would allow us to give you a new sustaining release where we know and we can tell you this is the only module we changed, allows us to then only test the interactions of that module very quickly, but still make sure that the version you're on is a very well-defined version for the whole OS that runs on the switch.
Awesome. Questions? Ethan?
Oh, I have several. So I've got let's say I've got an old closet switch, no 10 gig uplinks. Can I plug it into the 8400?
Yes.
Okay.
That was easy.
Is there a module?
Yeah, we can. I mean, we call the ports 10 gig, but they can't support 1 gig.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have customers doing that today.
Okay. Let's say I've got 8400s in the core, but I have other vendors' stuff out in the closets because all my budget was for this year was a core upgrade. Is that fine?
And the answer is yes again. The exception would be if there's any proprietary protocols used in the aggregation layer today, that would be something to check. But basically, yes. I mean, we support all open standard protocols. The connectivity is no problem.
To add on that, you support open standard EIGRP. I felt like you might be going there.
No, I was not
because
going
they
there,
opened
but
the
it's a good
standard.
thought.
And that one we don't. And if you want to reference us to how to implement the open standard EIGRP, we'll take that reference.
For anybody, but
I'm kidding.
I have to ask you a question.
We're happy to help you with OSPF.
And then has Aruba published any reference architectures that are built around the 8400?
So that we're going to be having in more detail. So what we'll have, from the beginning of things like config guides and design guides, and we have a general architecture. We're actually in the process right now of going deeper, because what we want to do is articulate not just how things can connect, which I think we have pretty well in hand, but also how to use some of the capabilities we talked about today in a little more detail and more examples. So we'll continue to have more collateral on that and guides. And actually on that one, we do welcome feedback from the community on how to do that differently, because some of the capabilities we talked about aren't traditional, here's example CLI, here's this, here's that. There's some things we're talking about that are actually, we think, better and different.
Another point, you guys talked about a 10-year timeline for this chassis. When you plug this thing in, I don't have to take it out for maybe as long as 10 years. So is that, customers asking for that? They want something that's going to, an asset they can depreciate for that long, or what's the thought process there?
So if you look, one of the most dominant platforms in the same place and network would be the CAT 6500.
Sure, yeah.
It goes back to the 90s, right? And it's still sitting there. So I would argue that history says that these things have a long life. Typically, the depreciation cycle, to answer your question exactly, does not go 10 years. But we've designed this thing to go in and really last. So you may or may not be 10 years on the same set of line card modules. You might have upgraded over time. You've added 400 gig at some point, et cetera, right? But this thing was built to last. As a comparison, the chassis one down in the portfolio and one for another has been around for the 5400 has been around for nearly 15 years, right? It's had a couple revs to it, but it's been around a long, long time. This is another really long-lived chassis for us.
Brandon, you had a couple questions.
So you mentioned Ospf. We also talked about Linux. So for routing, are we Quagga? What?
No, it's our own code. The full stack is our own code. So we like I said, we've been at, I think Frank was talking, we've got 20 years of protocol code that we've developed, so we just lifted it up.
Not something that came from like IP Infusion.
No.
I just saw a question scroll by that I figured I'd ask. It's about the analytics behind the box. Are the analytics, is the analytics data exportable to like a standard format that can be imported into some kind of visibility platform or reporting platform? Or is that something that's going to have to be crunched by specific software?
So all of the information that those agents collect, including their configuration and things like that, is available via that REST interface that we talked about. And so all of the data that's presented, in fact, kind of backing up us, a bit, we've seen the web UI of the agents, and all of that information presented in that web UI actually came via the REST interface from the switch. So I think really the short answer is that yes, all of the information that the agents are collecting and all the information in the time series database is available via a REST interface.
Okay, and I can back all that up somewhere by pulling through REST?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just sort of like a trivial answer to that question is the Google Sheets demo we showed. I mean, does that count as exporting data? I would say, yeah, it kind of does. So we can basically share data any format, any system, that's desired.
Well, I mean, I think the network engineer's preferred backup tool today is Notepad. So,
That's right.
yeah,
Now
I think
it's Excel.
Yeah. If we can back up to Excel, we've at least increased the data validity one step further, because Excel can do typos in spreadsheets. All right. So who's up next?
This is an 8-slot or 8-line card chassis. Are there other chassis coming for this product?
I can.
So, this is all we're announcing at this time. How's that?
Okay, fair enough. And then, so then on this chassis, is pricing set, and do we have a GA date where I can actually order this thing?
Maintenance.
Yeah, so it's actually orderable today.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And orders are in. We will cut loose volume builds later this month. And then it takes a little while for that inventory to trickle out to supply depots.
In other words, I can order it, but there's a lead time right now
Yeah.
as it ramps up. Yeah.
So that, if it's all right, that leads into the question I wanted to ask, which is the boring one, which is licensing and ongoing costs. So how is your software licensing done, or is it just one price for everything, and is it a recurring cost? Is it a one-off, bang, you bought it, or any insight would be helpful, because we all love licensing.
Yeah, so back to we're trying to make it easy to live with us, right? So what we've done in the first release, there isn't any stratified licensing packages. What everything on datasheet comes comes when you buy the box. Now, there could be advanced features we add in the future that we would reserve the right to incrementally monetize, but that's not the date today, or at least not the status as we go out the door. The kind of the right to use, I'll tell you a little bit about. There'll be a 5-year hardware warranty on it. It does have some restrictions. It's not, this isn't a 6-hour call to repair. That's an additional sort of support contract if you buy it, but there's at least some basic warranty. We can go over the terms. It'll be on the web here shortly, I think.
Next business day kind of thing.
What's that?
Next business day kind of thing.
Not on the standard warranty. That if you want, it's actually a 10-day replace on the standard hardware warranty. 5 years.
And only on the power tray.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want next day, you want 6-hour call to
that's a
repair,
separate-
we have a separate support package for that.
As long as it's clear. That's the
It's very
important
clear.
part.
On the software, we've decided to make this simple. 5 years of software support included when you buy the box. You have access to maintenance releases out of the gate.
Oh, play.
Technical support you got to pay for. We give you 90-day 8x5 basic support, but if you need help from Aruba, we have a support contract we can sell you. We have multiple different support options, but what we've decided to do is just try to really simplify how people think about acquiring the box, not create a big decision matrix with 14 elements in the flow chart. If I want this, I buy this, and just look,
So
what do you need?
basics,
You can buy
routing
it.
is not a separate,
that?
Like if you want to do routing, you want this.
Oh, you want layer
route.
3?
Well, that's a whole separate.
Oh, man.
Oh, you want
don't want it just to
route.
power on. You want it to do No. First release. So everything you've seen here today, layer 2, layer 3 protocols, NAE, REST, all that's in the.
I wanted
what
to
you
ask
get.
this before, but not necessarily the right time. MACsec, and or just the built-in IPsec type of encryption things, FIPS 142, all that stuff for when we have that desire and need, depending upon the organization.
So I will pass on the opportunity to take a shot at the practicality of hop-by-hop security in every network, but I'll let Rafi answer the question on that.
It's definitely designed for, in terms of data plane, right? It's designed for MACsec. We don't have MACsec support in first release, but we will have one. It's in the hardware, and in terms of control plane security, IPsec and so forth, there is a lot already built in. We can go into the specific details, but as you heard, there's no telnet, it's SSH. A lot of the browsing to the box actually requires HTTPS with certificates, and there is going to be a lot of support for secure tunnels where appropriate and required.
Now, and will there be, I imagine there will be, but out the gate, you don't necessarily have full certification where it's government certified in particular things. It's I can't remember whatever that thing that.
It's a whole bunch, common criteria, and FIPS, and that's a work in progress for our federal customers.
That's
Designed for
as long as there's a roadmap. That's.
Yeah, well, basically the first release we cut out will go into the various labs in the cert process, and if you know all the different Fed certs, they have different. Some stuff you work on with an outside firm, some stuff you have to go to government labs. So it just takes some time to work through all those.
Yeah.
We said no telnet and all that, and again, it's Linux, and you can get to a bash shell, right? So I can get telnet, right? Or how
You know what? If you want, you can go CD/RM-RF and walk away and brick it too, right? It's possible.
I'm not saying anybody wants, that's recommended. I'm just saying, are you controlling some of what we can put on there, or can it actually be put on there?
And we load Kubernetes on there and store all of our instances on it.
Well, because that could go to any other thing like IPsec and all this other stuff, right? Like if I can get to a shell, then I could put stuff there, right? So
you can load quad.
So the short answer is yes, you can get to a shell and you can put whatever you want there. Having said that, when you reboot the device, to the point about bricking it, you actually reboot from a secure location that unfolds the rest of the file system in the memory file system, right? So actually, when you reboot the box, you go back to a known good
good to
state.
know.
And so that telnet you put there after a reboot will not be there again.
Yeah,
I can see that being a check to see if the box rebooted. Can I telnet to it? Oh, somebody unplugged my switch.
So presumably that means the system files are protected that way, but like when you're adding
routing, don't call us.
when you're adding your own agents for the monitoring and so on, they are either stored on a different partition or something.
Exactly, they're stored on a
protected
different
somehow.
partition that gets mounted after the reboot is done, yes.
Okay, that's fair.
I just saw a good technical question come up. What kind of stacking features are supported today? Is it IRF? Is it something else?
So for the first release, we support multi-chassis lags for redundancy, and we will soon support things that are like IRF. We call it Virtual Stacking Framework, VSF, but it's basically the same.
I think VSF was in the question, so.
That's second.
Yeah, awesome. Another thing that came up that I wanted to bring up, because we were talking a little bit about licensing and things like that, and we talked about the validated reference designs versus the configuration guides. Is there going to be any kind of special training that is going to be offered to get people up to speed on this? Is it going to be more along the lines of teaching people how to use the REST API and all those functions, or is it something a little different?
Yeah, there is, and we're excited about it. I think the team's having fun getting ready for some of that. So we're doing a lot of enablement right now. Obviously, it's focused on our own technical people and our own pre-sales and so on, and then going out to partners. And then we will over time make labs available remotely. Right, some of the demos you saw that we're seeing today, those don't require a physical box on site, and so we're looking into how we can make some of these demos available into remote labs, plus courses ranging from 1 hour to workshops and so on. So we're definitely looking forward to a richness there. I think one thing that we're still working through is the best way to kind of share the multiple levels of programmability, right? There's kind of the easy, take scripts off the shelf, down to the really complex, build your own from scratch Python scripts. And so we are looking into how much we as a vendor actually do things like Python for networking and lead that versus, be just specific to our own gear.
Now, one of the other questions that I saw from one of the delegates in the previous session actually talked about that Python scripting and that capability to kind of create your own programmability. I have to ask, are you guys looking at any kind of an app store model where you can go out and you can pull down like scripts from like an Aruba approved GitHub repository to enable functionality on the box? And maybe either... Unfortunately, I think for legal reasons, I'm not allowed to call it that, but...
Well, I think as Charles and Scott went over a little bit, that's how we're thinking around it. So we have this Aruba Solutions Exchange, and then also you can have sort of a GitHub approach, and then the Airheads community to stitch that together. And so we can use whatever words you want to describe it, but basically they'll be available certified and otherwise.
So when you talk about the other person's app store, right? That kind of implies primarily some monetization strategy, right? Let's be really clear. The Aruba Solution Exchange, the GitHub, and the Airheads community is not. There's nothing that we're not going to monetize that collaboration and those scripts. They are for our customers, for our prospective customers, to basically collaborate and share kind of recipes and again make their jobs easier, more productive. However, in talking with partners, because Michael and I have been around the world talking to some large partners, we actually see partners, kind of waking up and realizing that, hey, I have some value-added differentiation I could provide, some large enterprise, right? I know their operations, I know their hot buttons, I know I've been in their network for 5 years. We do have partners that could create professional service offerings, and we, it's something we'll even look at. But you get professional service offerings around customizing things for your particular operational environment.
Now, let me lead into that also. What's the supportability level of something like that? So let's say I go out on a Aruba Solutions Exchange and I download an approved script, and either it breaks something or it does something that I wasn't intending in my network, and I have a support contract. Can I call the support line and say, hey, I pulled this thing down from Solutions Exchange, can you help me debug it to figure it out? Or is it going to be kind of one of those things of, if it's not in the OS when we ship it, we're not going to touch it?
No, it's going to be the former.
Okay.
If it's certified, we're going to try to work things through with you, right?
Okay.
It may not be 100% all the time, depending on what you've done. We may have to roll back to known good script and start trying from there. Okay. But actually, our own support team will be authors and distributors of scripts, right? You can imagine you file a trouble ticket. The first thing the support person wants to do, rather than tell you to, run all these debug commands and call me the next time it happens, here's a script, please install it. When it fires, send it back to me, and we'll continue on with the troubleshooting. So
That's cool.
The support process, we believe, will be augmented by the tunability of these scripts.
I agree.
So there's a question that I want to tag onto as well. Is there a documented process or planned documentation around in-service software updates And the part I want to tag onto that is, as you're going from version to version, will there be this will break if you do this, but not, oh, I read the release notes and I figured out it will break, where it'll systematically analyze the system and say, yes, you do this, and provide guidance. So documentation for progress, as well as any type of plans for guidance through the intelligence analytics.
So I'm going to kind of step away from ISSU just a little bit, because depending on whether you're a conference service provider or enterprise, ISSU means different things. So
Yeah.
we do have ISSU, I think that's reasonable to claim. Our software upgrade process will be subject to certain caveats, as everybody is. There's certain, you have to follow a progression of certain versions at times. Sometimes a major version change isn't going to be able to be done via ISSU, so I don't want to say that's 100%. But I think the question was actually tuned more around the NE agents. So if you saw in the code that Charles put up, the version of the REST URI is actually in the address itself. So we have built into versioning, we have built versioning into the URIs themselves. So we will support likely, I think, 2 major versions moving forward. So scripts you've built, even if we've moved the data model forward and drastically changed it, that'll be a V2 or a V3 or a V4, and there'll be an N-1 that carries along for some time to help you bridge that gap. It could be the case at some point in time, some number of years down the road, there is we've had to drop a certain version of the URIs, or at this major release you're on a new set. But the idea is to provide versioned REST APIs so that your investment in scripts work even if you've done a major upgrade and we've changed the model.
Thank you.
All right. A lot of people think of Aruba because of their wireless relationship. Is there any magic in the 8400 that would cater to that? Assuming the answer is no, but thought I'd ask anyway.
Why do you assume no?
Well, it seems like there's maybe an ag layer function.
Yeah,
I think keep that in the closet.
I think if stepping back even from the 8400, I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of the day. There's a lot of Aruba effort around the software assets. So how do we do network controls, network management, policy definition, analytics, and also things like cloud and location, and some things like location, obviously more wirelessly oriented. But in general, we are absolutely looking at that. So something like the analytics, the user and entity behavior analytics, there's an obvious synergy there, right, which we'll pursue. Network management, we can manage these things together. And then also some of the, over time, kind of automation and API calls, we will be building more integrations in that over time. I think you hopefully appreciated today how flexible the systems are, and there's a lot of focus on APIs actually across Aruba. And so we're obviously going to be consumers of that ourselves. And so we will certainly do that. I think the near-term points will be around operational efficiency. Automation, troubleshooting, visibility, analytics is one big thing, and the other big thing will be security. Those are the 2 use cases I think we see very clearly around, if you want to call it a better together.
So in that vein, I actually had a question that was in line with that, because in the product literature of the 8400, one of the things that is talked about is mobility and IoT as a differentiator for bringing that into the core chassis. How do you see that with the mobility and the IoT? What is the differentiator there for the 8400 in enabling mobility and IoT specifically?
Yeah, this one really comes from what the customers are telling us, because I think part of the question is like, wait a minute, what does a core chassis have to do with mobile devices? And what we've seen is just this explosion in complexity of the network itself. And the core is one of those pieces I think Tom alluded to earlier that's been the latest to change. And so what we're seeing is the pace of change, things like VLAN explosion with IoT adoption, things like unpredictable traffic flows, things like user traffic going north, south, and out to the cloud much more often, with encrypted apps much more often versus east-west and client-server, have started to affect the core. And so the core still, by many customers, is viewed just as a rapid transport, but we think, as we talked about today, it can do a lot more. So it's really around enabling that visibility troubleshooting into those use cases. So it's not necessarily like, hey, without this core chassis, you can't use your video camera. It would be, with this core chassis, you can have confidence that as you deploy new video cameras, new connected systems, and have mobility traffic, including things like explosion of mobile video, you can have visibility, troubleshooting, and service deployment much more efficiently.
And thank you. And then a follow-up question to that is, because you had mentioned, I've seen in your literature that you guys, kind of squarely aimed at the Catalyst series, that you wanted to come and dislodge the campus segment. What's your elevator pitch? If I'm an elite engineer and I'm advising, a company that I'm talking to say, hey, let's take a look at this. What's the elevator pitch for a company to abandon, what they've been entrenched in for 20 years to say, let's take a look at this and let's maybe make the change?
Yeah, so we don't, we never disparage that system, right? You know,
Yeah.
a lot of
Sure.
respect for it. Some of us worked in the company and have friends there still. We start with, look, we're bringing you an 8RU, a 19 terabit package that is the same carrier class characteristics of what you'd normally associate with a core data center switch or a core internet router. So we start with the system is designed for a large failure domain and to not let you down. Compared to the competition, kind of in these price points in this kind of package, no one's got close to the level of performance we have in the system or the table size scalability. But honestly, the discussion really ends up centering around what is going on in your kind of your operational evolution. We often talk about AOSCX as network as a microservice, and so getting into being able to automate provisioning flows. Ultimately, the discussion about halfway through, as I talked about a little bit ago, gets to NAE, and for that elite engineer in that team, that is where we stay the whole rest of the meeting, because people can see the tasks they have to do every day, the issues they have to leave with. They can see how AOSCX and NAE fundamentally changes it for them. So we often, even with our own systems engineers, we talk about getting cloudy, right? So going from being a CLI jockey to learning a little bit of Python configurability, because we have a bunch of libraries to help you, but kind of moving down that step towards towards understanding DevOps, towards understanding automation, to being a little bit of at least kind of a hacker to get your job done efficiently. That it ends up being a very easy discussion, especially with the lead engineers. Because a lot of these folks, as you know, right, they've kind of already gone through this journey on the data center side. The campus is the last place to catch up. If you were doing a major 10 gig migration of the data center the last 10 years, and you were looking at integrating OpenStack, or you were looking at a variety of private cloud sorts of solutions, you're probably already on. You might be using Ansible or Chef for config and other things. You're kind of data center. You're already on that path to automation. It's just most of the products you buy on campus today from other folks, kind of don't fit in that modern era. And so what we've done is we've taken kind of, I think, well understood concepts, at least from an application perspective, an automation perspective, and just applied them in a unique way.
Awesome.
Okay.
Any final questions? Got time maybe for one more? Congratulations, guys. You answered all the questions. Way to go. All right.
Tom, thanks a lot.
Oh, no, thank you, Tom. Actually, I think we'll go ahead and, Tom, do you have any final words for us to kind of close it out here?
Yeah, so just would really like to say thanks again to everybody for coming here today. That was a really good quality interaction. Really appreciated your questions. As we move on past this, please feel free to lob more at us. Listening to you, especially you, all of you out there, listen to your questions, listen to your criticisms. They just make us better, right? And so the request for ongoing feedback is genuine and sincere. To my whole team, thank you for what you've done with this technology. It's been a blast to watch. These things really don't happen very often in networking, maybe a half dozen times over the last couple decades. So it's been a lot of fun to watch people do what they do. And hopefully all of you will be hands-on this product in the short months ahead and give us even better feedback. Thanks.